There's an Irish proverb, is Fearr, Gaeilge, Bhriste, Bearla, Cliste, which means that broken Irish is better than smart English.
One of Europe's oldest languages, Irish has been spoken continuously in Ireland for over 4,000 years. However, while the language has always been spoken in Ireland, its status has fluctuated significantly throughout the country's long history. Once Ireland's main language, Irish is now only regularly spoken by approximately 5% of the country's population. The reasons for this seismic shift? According to fluent Irish speaker Dara McGuill, there are two clear culprits: England's colonisation of Ireland and the Great Famine.
The British, in common with other colonial powers, want everybody to speak the colonial language. They want all of the systems, all of the official business to be done in their language. And also there's a suspicion that they want to know what the natives are saying, that if the natives are speaking their own language, but they could be saying anything. So over the 800 years of British occupation, they brought in laws to ban speaking Irish in official circumstances. So you couldn't use Irish in court, you couldn't use Irish in school, you couldn't use Irish in any kind of government interaction. And then there were other laws that prohibited people from getting particular jobs unless they spoke English. So that happened and happened for hundreds of years. And then we got to the famine in the mid-18th century, and our population went in 5 years from 8 million to 4 million. And of the 4 million who disappeared, half of those maybe emigrated, huge amount to the United States, and the other half died. And they would all have been Irish speakers. When they got to the States, Irish was no use to them, so they had to speak English. And of course, the 2 million who were dead, they had no use for Irish either. So we went from a position of maybe 7 million out of the 8 million being Irish speakers to 3 million out of 4 million being Irish speakers, and very poor. Then the move to English was accelerated because to get work or to get any kind of assistance, you had to speak English.
Nevertheless, in spite of the injustice and tragedy the Irish faced, the language persevered.
The language survived in a large extent because the people who kept it alive until, we'll say, around 1900, they could speak no other language. So they kept the language alive without realising the great value that it was to the whole country. And then around 1900, as part of the movement for independence and rediscovering our culture, people realised that the language and music and so on were very important parts of this. So they went and they moved to these areas and they learned the language from the people who still spoke it. And they wrote down everything they could, and then in time came, they recorded everything they could. And that's still going on.
The other essential measure taken to preserve Irish? Enabling and encouraging Irish youth to learn the language.
Part of the protection of the language since the 1960s has been building of workplaces in the areas where people speak the language. So to make sure that they can stay at home, because what we know is that if the father of the family has to emigrate to get work, or the parents, that the family will go with them and they'll stop speaking Irish. So if there was one job even at home, the whole family stayed, and that had a huge impact. And then also Irish is a compulsory school subject, so most people can speak some Irish, and certainly most people would understand basic Irish, so they don't feel that it's a foreign language that they have no connection with. But a small proportion of people, well, small-ish, 10% perhaps of the country, maybe less, would consider it much more valuable than that. They would choose to send their children to schools that teach through Irish, and then maybe 5% of people would speak Irish at home as a main home language, and that will continue the language. If those people who are 30 today decide to speak Irish to their children, that's another 100 years for the language. That's all we need for another 100 years, and 100 years is a long time. And after that, we'll worry about the next 100 years.